The key jammed in the lock. I turned it twice before realizing something was wrong. The door to my country house was unlocked. My heart pounded. That property had been empty for almost 2 years, ever since I'd moved permanently to the city for work. I only came here occasionally to check on the place, pay the bills, and keep things running. No one should be inside. I pushed the door open slowly. The creak of the hinges echoed down the silent hallway. Then I heard it. Children's laughter. Voices. The unmistakable smell of food cooking filled my nose. Someone was living in my house. I walked down the hallway, each step heavy with disbelief. The living room, once covered with white sheets protecting the furniture, now showed an occupied couch, pillows scattered on the floor, toys everywhere. My coffee table was full of dirty cups, video game controllers, crumpled magazines. "Hi, Auntie." I froze. A girl of about 8 appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a glass of juice. She looked at me as if it were the most natural thing in the world for me to be there, as if she had more right to be in that house than I did. "Auntie." My stomach twisted before my brain even processed it fully. There was only one person who could have brought those children here. "Who's there, honey?" The voice came from the kitchen. Deep, slow, too familiar. My brother appeared in the doorway, drying his hands on a dish towel I recognized as mine. He stopped when he saw me, but didn't look surprised. Or guilty. Just that same tired smile as always, like I was the inconvenient visitor. "Oh, you're here," he said, tossing the towel over his shoulder. "Didn't think you came around this place anymore." I stayed silent for a full 3 seconds. My mind spun, trying to find words for the absurd scene in front of me. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice higher than usual. He shrugged, turning back to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. The girl kept staring at me, curious. "Living," he replied from there, as if it were obvious. "The house was empty. You never come here." "Living." He said living like someone saying, enjoying the sunshine. As if trespassing on someone else's property were a weekend choice. I stepped into the kitchen. 3 children were sitting at the table, the girl who'd greeted me, a boy of about 10 playing on a phone, and a smaller boy, maybe 5, drawing in a notebook. My brother was stirring a pot on the stove. My stove. Using my pans. "You can't be here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is my house." "Relax," he answered without turning around. "I'm not doing anything wrong. Just needed a temporary place." Temporary. I looked around. Clothes hung on a makeshift clothesline in the yard. Boxes piled up in the corner of the living room. Toys, school backpacks, a stack of bills on the counter. There was nothing temporary about it. "How long have you been here?" I asked. He scratched his neck, thinking. "About 4 months." 4 months. He'd been living in my house for 4 months and I hadn't even known. "How did you get in?" "Remember that spare key you left with Mom years ago?" He smiled awkwardly. "Borrowed it." Borrowed. As if private property were a public library. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the anger from boiling over. "You broke into my house." "Broke in is a bit harsh." He finally turned to face me, leaning on the counter. "I'm your brother. I thought you'd understand. I've had some problems, you know how it is. Lost my job, the ex doesn't help at all, the kids needed a roof. You've got 2 houses and live in only one. It doesn't hurt to let us stay here a while." Ah, so it was my fault for working, saving, and buying a second home. His twisted logic was impressive. "You didn't ask for my permission," I replied. "Yes, I did. I called you months ago. You said you'd think about it." I vaguely remembered that call. He'd mentioned difficulties, asked for help, and I said I needed to evaluate things. I never gave a definite answer because, honestly, I knew my brother. I knew that temporary help meant permanent accommodation. It meant never leaving. "I never authorized you to enter my house," I said, each word slow and controlled. He rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. It's just until I get back on my feet. A few more months and we'll be gone. A few more months. As if his time was worth more than my right to my own property. I looked at the children. They were eating in silence now, sensing the tension in the air. The youngest was watching me with wide, frightened eyes. My heart tightened. It wasn't their fault. But it wasn't my responsibility either. You need to leave, I said, softer this time. Oh, come on. My brother huffed, irritated now. You're gonna throw me out? Throw your nephews out on the street. And there it was. The guilt card. The emotional manipulation he'd used since childhood. Turning his mistake into my responsibility. You put your kids in this situation by breaking into my house without permission, I replied. Not me. He slammed the spoon against the pot, making the kids jump. Family helps family, he shouted. I'd do the same for you. But he wouldn't. I'd known my brother my whole life. He never did anything for anyone unless it benefited him first. Every broken promise, every borrowed money that never came back, every time he'd shown up at our parents' house with a new excuse and another demand. You have 1 week, I said. 1 week to find another place and leave. You're not serious. I am. I turned and left before he could see my hands shaking. Before he could realize how much it was affecting me. Because that's exactly what he wanted, to see me crack, to make me feel guilty enough to give in. In the car, sitting behind the wheel, I grabbed my phone. My first instinct was to call our parents. Tell them what was happening. Ask for support. But then I remembered all the other times. How they'd always defended my brother. How I was always the successful one, the one who didn't need help, while he was the poor one, the one going through a hard time. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I didn't call. Instead, I went straight home and spent the night researching. Trespassing laws. Property owner rights. Eviction process. How long it would take. What my rights were. And that's when I discovered something that kept me staring at the ceiling for hours, unable to sleep. Once someone establishes residence in a property for a certain period, even without permission, the process to remove them legally can take months. Months of court proceedings. Months of paying lawyers. Months with my brother living in my house while the system decided the obvious, that he had no right to be there. Worse, if I simply changed the locks or cut off the water and power, I could be sued for illegal eviction. I'd be the criminal for trying to reclaim my own property. The system was protecting the trespasser. The next morning, I called 3 different lawyers. They all told me the same thing. File for eviction, wait for the hearing, expect it to take 3 to 6 months. But it's my house, I repeated to the third lawyer, frustration dripping from my voice. I understand, ma'am, he replied with professional patience. But the law protects people from being put out on the street without due process, even when they're living there illegally. It's frustrating, I know. But that's the procedure. I hung up and stared at the wall of my office. 6 months. Half a year of my life dealing with this. Half a year paying the bills of a house I wasn't using while my brother lived there for free. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. What did you say to your brother? She snapped before I could even say hello. Hi, Mom. Good morning to you too. Don't start with that. He called me crying. Said you want to throw him and the kids out on the street. Crying. My 36-year-old brother, crying to Mom because he got caught trespassing. Mom, he's living in my house without permission, I began. It's just a house. You don't even use it, she interrupted. How can you be so selfish? They're your nephews. Family. And there it was again. That magic word that was supposed to erase all boundaries, all violations, all disrespect. The house is mine, I said, tired. You've always been like this. Always thinking only of yourself. Your brother is going through a hard time and you, who have so much, can't help your own family. I closed my eyes. It was useless. It always was. Goodbye, Mom, I said, and hung up. 3 messages came right after. All variations of the same theme. I was selfish, cruel, abandoning my family. I blocked her number. Then I blocked my father's, my brother's, and 2 uncles who were probably next in line to call. Because I finally understood something. This wouldn't be solved by talking. It wouldn't be solved by being reasonable or giving another chance. My brother wasn't going to leave willingly. My family would never support me. I was alone in this. And if I was alone, then I was going to handle it my way. The next 3 days were the worst of my life. My brother not only ignored the 1-week deadline, he doubled down. He started posting photos on social media. Photos of the children playing in the yard. Photos of him cooking dinner in the kitchen. Photos of the family gathered in the living room, watching movies. My living room. My kitchen. My yard. And the captions were always the same variations. Family is everything. Home sweet home. New beginnings are possible when you have people who support you. He was building a narrative. Turning the invasion into a story of overcoming. And worst of all, people were believing it. Comments praised his strength, his dedication to the kids. No one asked whose house that was. On the 4th night, he went further. I received a call from a distant cousin, someone I barely spoke to. "Hey, I heard you're helping your brother," he said, excited. "So cool. We need more people like you in the world." I was speechless for 5 seconds. Helping? Yeah. He said you let him and the kids stay in your country house while he gets back on his feet. Big heart you've got. I hung up without answering. He was telling everyone that I'd offered the house. That it was an act of kindness on my part, not his invasion. He was rewriting the story before I could tell my side. I called him immediately. "Are you telling everyone I offered the house?" "And you didn't." His voice was calm, almost amused. "You're my sister." The house was empty. It's basically the same thing. It's not the same thing. You invaded. Look at the word you use. Invasion. He laughed on the other end of the line. You sound like those rich people who forget what hardship is. I'm your family. This isn't invasion, it's necessity. Get out of my house. No. The word fell like a slammed door. Simple. Direct. Definitive. What? I'm not leaving, he repeated. And you're not going to make me leave. Because if you try, everyone will know what kind of person you really are. They'll know you put 3 innocent children out on the street because you, with your 2 houses and fat salary, can't muster a bit of compassion for your own family. My hand trembled so much I almost dropped the phone. Aren't you ashamed? Ashamed. He let out a bitter laugh. Shame should be on you. But relax, little sister. I won't stay here forever. Just until I get a better job, save some money, find a decent place. Maybe a year. A year and a half tops. A year and a half. I hung up on him. I sat on the sofa in my real home, the house where I actually lived, and finally let the tears fall. They weren't tears of sadness. They were pure anger. Indignation. Helplessness. How did I let it get this far? How didn't I see this coming? But I knew the answer. I'd always known what my brother was like. Since childhood he learned that whining and playing the victim worked. Our parents always gave in. Always overlooked. Always made excuses for him while demanding responsibility from me. When I was 15 and he was 18, he took money from my drawer to go out with friends. $500 I'd saved working part-time that summer. When I confronted him, he said he'd pay it back. He never did. My mother told me to let it go. He's going through a hard time, she justified. My brother was always going through a hard time. At 21, he crashed my car and lied to the insurance, saying it had been stolen. I found out the truth weeks later. When I confronted my parents, they asked me not to make a fuss. He already has too many problems, they said. At 25, He asked me for $5,000 for a business opportunity. Against my instincts, I lent it. He blew it all on online gambling. I never saw that money again. And now, at 36, he'd invaded my house and was emotionally blackmailing me through 3 innocent children. The pattern was clear. He would never change. Because he'd never had to. There was always someone to clean up his mess. Always someone to blame. Always an excuse ready and a family willing to believe. The next morning, I went to the country house again. I needed to see the extent of the damage with my own eyes. I parked on the street and watched for 10 minutes before getting out of the car. My brother was in the yard, pushing the youngest on the swing I'd installed years ago. The other 2 kids were playing ball. Everything looked perfect. A margarine commercial scene. Except it was all a lie built on theft. I went in without knocking. After all, it was my house. The interior was worse than the first time. Much worse. The living room wall had a huge mark, as if something heavy had hit it. The hardwood floor, which I'd recently renovated before moving, was scratched and dirty. Stains of something like juice or soda marked the Persian rug that had cost $3,000. I went to the master bedroom. My old room. The door was ajar. I pushed it slowly. Clothes everywhere. The bed unmade. Drawers open. My personal items that I'd left stored in the closet were scattered on the floor. Photos, letters, travel keepsakes. Trampled. Ignored. In the bathroom, hygiene products that weren't mine occupied the entire sink. The shower stall had mold in the corners. The curtain I'd bought weeks before moving was torn. I returned to the living room. My brother entered through the back door, still smiling. The smile died when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" "It's my house," I replied, my voice colder than ice. "I can come whenever I want." "You didn't call first. It's an invasion of privacy." The irony would have been funny if it weren't tragic. Invasion of privacy? I repeated slowly. You invaded my property and you're accusing me of invasion of privacy? He crossed his arms, taking on that defensive stance I knew so well. Look, I know you're upset. But you need to understand my side. I had no option. Do you think I wanted to be here? That I wanted to depend on you? You're not depending on me. You're stealing from me. It's not theft to use something that wasn't being used. His distorted logic was impressive. As if property were a conditional concept, valid only when convenient for him. How long were you planning to stay here without telling me? I asked. He looked away. I was going to tell you. Eventually. When? When I discovered you'd sold my furniture. When you'd completely destroyed the place. You're exaggerating. A few little stains, some scratches. Nothing a bit of cleaning can't fix. A few little stains. The man had destroyed thousands of dollars in renovations and called it little stains. You will leave, I declared. If you don't leave voluntarily, I will make you leave through the law. Through the law. He laughed. You talked to a lawyer? Because I did too. You know what I found out? That since I've been living here more than 3 months, you can't just throw me out. You have to file an eviction. And do you know how long that takes? Of course he knew. Of course he had checked. He had planned every detail of this invasion. And there's more, he continued, stepping toward me. Do you know what happens if you cut water, power, or change the locks before a court order? You commit a crime. Illegal eviction. I can sue you. I can even seek compensation for the children's emotional damages. He had rehearsed that speech. Every word calculated to hit me, to show he had control. So you planned this, I said, more to myself than to him. From the start. You knew exactly what you were doing. I planned to survive, he corrected. I planned to give a roof to my kids. If you can't understand that, that's your problem, not mine. The children came in through the back door at that moment, sweaty and laughing. They stopped when they saw me, the joy disappearing from their faces. My heart tightened. They weren't to blame. They were victims just like me, only in a different way. Victims of a father who used them as a shield. Who put them in the middle of a war he started. "Hi, Aunt," the middle girl said softly. I forced a smile. "Hi, dear." My brother put his hand on her shoulder, a completely fake protective gesture. "See," he said, looking at me. "Are you really going to put these kids on the street?" And there it was. The final blow. Supreme manipulation. He knew I wasn't like him. Knew I had compassion. And he was using it against me. I left that house feeling something I'd never felt before in my life. Pure hatred for my own brother. On the way back, a certainty grew inside me like a flame. If the system wasn't going to help me quickly, if my family wasn't going to support me, if my brother thought he'd won this battle, then I needed to change strategy. I wasn't going to play by his rules. I wasn't going to wait months for the legal system. I wasn't going to accept being the victim in my own story. I was going to do what I should have done long ago. Protect what was mine, whatever the cost. I arrived home and, for the first time in days, smiled. Because I finally had a plan. And my brother had no idea what was coming. The plan began with a call to my lawyer at 7 the next morning. "I need everything documented," I told him. "Photos, videos, witnesses. I want an eviction case so well supported that no judge can ignore it." "Perfect," he replied. "But remember, this will still take time. Probably at least 3 months." "I know. But in the meantime, I can continue visiting my property, right? After all, it's my house." There was a pause. "Technically, yes. As long as you don't interfere with their lives in a way that constitutes harassment or illegal eviction." Understood. I hung up with a smile on my lips. My brother knew the law. But I was learning too. And I was learning fast. I spent the next 2 days researching. I read every article, every forum, every account of property owners in similar situations. I discovered loopholes. I discovered what I could and couldn't do. And most importantly, I discovered exactly how to make his life unbearable without breaking any law. On Tuesday, I went to the house at 6 in the morning. I knocked on the door hard. My brother opened in a robe, his eyes puffy with sleep. "What the hell do you want at this hour?" "I came to inspect my property," I replied, passing by him with a folder under my arm. "As the owner, I have the right to check the condition of the property. It's all legal." He tried to block my passage, but I was already inside. I took photos of everything. Every scratch on the floor. Every stain on the wall. Every broken object. I photographed the burn mark on the kitchen counter that hadn't been there before. The hole in the hallway wall. The doorknob ripped off the guest room. "You can't do this," he shouted behind me. "Yes, I can. It's my house. I'm documenting the damage for the case." The children appeared at the bedroom doors, frightened by the shouting. I lowered the camera immediately. I wasn't going to use the children. That was off limits. "Good morning, kids," I said gently. "Sorry for the noise. Go have breakfast." They looked at their father, uncertain. He waved irritably for them to go back to their rooms. I finished the inspection in 20 minutes. I had 342 photos. Enough evidence to show any judge that my brother was destroying my property. "I'll be back tomorrow," I warned as I left. "Same time. You can't keep coming here all the time." "Yes, I can. Ask your lawyer." And I came back. Every day. Always at 6 in the morning. On the 3rd day, my brother started locking the door and refusing to open. No problem. I simply sat in the car across the street and stayed there. Watching. Noting. Documenting every movement. Did he leave to take the kids to school? I noted the time and took photos of the house visible through the windows. Did he have visitors? I documented it. Did he let trash accumulate in the yard? Photos and notes. In the first week, he still tried to ignore me. In the second, he started complaining. "You're stalking me," he shouted through the window on the 8th day. "This is harassment." "I'm on a public street," I replied calmly. "In front of my property. I'm not doing anything illegal." I called the city hall and found out the house was violating 3 municipal codes. The trash accumulated in the yard. The tall grass. A broken pipe leaking onto the sidewalk. I filed anonymous complaints. All properly supported with photos. 5 days later, an inspector showed up. The property was fined. The fine was in my name, of course, since it was my house. But I filed the document. More evidence of damage and negligence. My brother called me that night, furious. "You reported me to the city?" "Me." I feigned innocence. "Why would I report my own house? Maybe some concerned neighbor." "You're a psychopath. And you're a trespasser. But here we are." I hung up. The third week was when things got really interesting. I hired a private inspector. Paid out of my own pocket for him to assess all structural damage and estimate repair costs. The report was detailed, $23,000 in damages. $23,000 that my brother had caused in less than 5 months. I attached the report to the eviction case my lawyer was preparing. But I didn't stop there. I discovered he was registered as unemployed but was working informally making deliveries. I saw him leaving the house in a delivery company uniform several times. This meant 2 things. First, he had income and could be paying rent elsewhere. Second, he might be committing social benefits fraud. I didn't report it. Not yet. But I kept the information. You never know when an ace up your sleeve might come in handy. The 4th week was when my mother showed up. I was in the car, making my morning notes, when she knocked on the window. "You've lost your mind," she shouted as soon as I opened the door. "Good morning, Mom." "Don't give me good morning. You're stalking your brother. Showing up every day at the house, taking photos, calling inspectors. What kind of person have you become?" I got out of the car and faced her. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt in the face of her disappointment. "The kind of person who defends what's theirs," I replied. "The kind who won't let themselves be cheated by their own family." "Family." She spat the word. "You don't know the meaning of that word." "I do. I know exactly. Family is those who respect your boundaries. Who don't invade your house. Who don't steal your key and then lie about having permission. That's real family." "He's your brother. And I'm your daughter," I shouted back, surprising even myself. "When was the last time you defended me? When was the last time you supported me in anything? Every time he does something wrong, you find an excuse. Every time I set a boundary, you say I'm being selfish." She went silent, her eyes wide. "You've always demanded responsibility from me," I continued, my voice trembling now. "Always expected me to be perfect, to solve my own problems, to need nothing. And I was all of that. I graduated, got a job, bought a house, built a life. And now that someone wants to take it from me, you come asking for compassion? Where was your compassion when I needed support?" "That's different," she started. "It's always different when it's him." I cut her off. "There's always an excuse. Always a reason. But you know what? I'm done. Done being the invisible daughter. Done having my feelings ignored. And done accepting that family love means being abused." I got back in the car and slammed the door before she could respond. Before I could see the hurt on her face. Because if I saw it, I might give in. And I couldn't give in. Not this time. I drove to my real home, my hands still trembling on the wheel. But along with the tremor, there was something else. A strange feeling of liberation. As if a chain I didn't even know I was carrying had finally broken. That night, I received a message from my brother. A single sentence. "You're going to regret this." I blocked the number. In the 5th week, he tried one last trick. He created an online fundraiser. Family being evicted by heartless sister, read the title. The text was a masterpiece of manipulation, talking about the kids, about his struggles, about how he just needed a little more time to recover, and about how the rich, insensitive sister was putting them on the street out of pure malice. It didn't have my name, but anyone who knew our story would know who he meant. The fundraiser raised $800 on the first day. When I discovered it, my first reaction was anger. The second was something completely unexpected, relief. Because now he had proven publicly that he had the ability to raise money, that he had a support network, that he could, if he wanted, have rented a place honestly instead of invading mine. I saved all the fundraiser content. Screenshots, comments, everything. More evidence for the case. My lawyer loved it. This shows bad faith, he explained. It shows he had alternatives and chose to invade your property anyway. Also, he's publicly admitting he knows you want him out. He can't later claim he thought he had permission. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. After a month and a half of meticulous preparation, we would finally have our day in court. But my brother had one last trick up his sleeve. One I didn't see coming. The Sunday before the hearing, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered instinctively. Hello. Hi, Auntie. It was my eldest niece, the 10-year-old girl. My heart tightened. Hi, dear. Are you okay? Auntie. Her voice was trembling. Daddy said if you don't drop the case, we're going to have nowhere to live. He said I had to call you and ask you not to do this. I don't want to sleep in the car again, Auntie. Please. Again. The word echoed in my mind. Sleeping in the car again meant my brother had already put these children in that situation before. And he was using it to manipulate me. Sweetheart, listen. I spoke as gently as possible. Your father is an adult. He needs to find a proper place for you to live. I'll promise you one thing. You won't sleep in the car. Don't worry about that. How do you know? Because I know your father. He has options. He's just trying to make me feel guilty. But you don't need to worry about that, okay? That's an adult problem. I heard my brother yell something in the background. Then the call dropped. I sat on the floor of my living room and finally cried. Not from sadness. From exhaustion. From relief at being almost at the end of this battle. And from a deep, visceral rage that someone could use their own children as emotional weapons. But also from renewed determination. Because now I knew with absolute certainty, I was doing the right thing. Not for me, but for those children. Who deserved a father who solved his own problems instead of dragging them down with him. 2 days until the hearing. 48 hours until my life returned to normal. Or so I thought. On the morning of the hearing, I woke at 5 o'clock. I couldn't sleep anyway. I put on my best suit, tied my hair back, and took a deep breath in front of the mirror. I looked confident. Inside, I was terrified. Not of losing. My lawyer had assured me the case was solid. But of what would come after. Of the consequences. Of finally cutting the last thread that tied me to that dysfunctional family. I arrived at the courthouse at 8. My brother was already there, sitting on the corridor bench with a public defender beside him. He saw me and looked away. A good sign. It meant he knew he was wrong. At 8:40, they called me into a small room. My lawyer was there, along with his, and a mediator. Before we go before the judge, the mediator began, I'd like to try a settlement. Often we can resolve these matters without a formal hearing. I looked at my lawyer. He shrugged, leaving the decision to me. I'm listening, I said. My brother's lawyer leaned forward. My client recognizes that the situation is complicated. He proposes the following: 60 more days to find another place. In return, he agrees to repair all damages before leaving and never contact you again. 60 days. 2 more months of that hell. No, I answered immediately. Think about it, the mediator interjected. A hearing can lead to a court order, but enforcing that order can take time. With an agreement, you have guarantees and a set deadline. I already gave a deadline. I looked directly at my brother across the table. I gave 1 week. He laughed in my face. Why would I believe any promise now? I will comply. My brother spoke for the first time, his voice low. I swear. How did you swear you'd return the $5,000? I retorted. How did you swear you'd only stay a little while? He opened his mouth to answer, but his lawyer touched his arm, signaling him to be quiet. My client rejects the proposal, my lawyer declared. We'll go to the hearing. We left that room and went to the courtroom. The room was nearly empty, just us, the lawyers, and 2 other cases waiting. The judge was a man in his 60s, looking tired, like he'd seen this kind of case 1,000 times. Case number 2847, the court clerk announced. Eviction for trespass. I stood and went to the front. My brother did the same. The judge skimmed the file and looked at my lawyer. Proceed. My lawyer was surgical. He presented the photos, the damage reports, the municipal complaints, the fundraiser screenshots. He showed that my brother had entered the property without authorization, using a stolen key, and had been there for over 5 months causing significant damage. Additionally, Your Honor, he added, the defendant created an online campaign admitting publicly that he knew the owner opposed his presence on the property. This shows awareness of the illegality of his actions. The judge nodded, taking notes. Then it was my brother's lawyer's turn. He tried the emotion card, the children, financial hardships, the need for time to get back on their feet. My client had no bad intentions, he argued. He genuinely believed that, as family, he would have his sister's support during this difficult period. Did he ask for permission? The judge interrupted. The lawyer hesitated. There was a conversation, but yes or no. Not explicitly, but then he trespassed on the property. The judge cut in, flipping through the documents, and caused $23,000 in damages. The damages are exaggerated, Your Honor. It was merely normal use of a residential property. The judge picked up one of the photos my lawyer had submitted. It showed the hole in the hallway wall. Is that normal use? Silence. The judge sighed and looked directly at my brother. Sir, do you have anything to say in your defense? My brother stood. He took a deep breath. And then he began the speech he had likely rehearsed all night. Your Honor, I made a mistake. I know that. But I was desperate. My children had nowhere to live. My sister has 2 houses and I thought she would understand. That she would help me. We're family. His voice broke at the end. I saw tears in his eyes. And for 1 second, just 1 second, I felt a twinge of guilt. Then I remembered the call with my niece. The manipulations. The $5,000. A lifetime of being the invisible sister. Family doesn't trespass on someone else's property, the judge said, returning the documents to the clerk. Family asks. Family respects the response. You did none of those things. He brought down the gavel. I grant immediate eviction. The defendant has 48 hours to vacate the property and remove all his belongings. After that period, the owner is authorized to remove any remaining items and change the locks. Additionally, I order the defendant to pay the documented damages in the amount of $23,000, to be paid in monthly installments of $500 until fully paid. 48 hours. 2 days. I looked at my brother. He was pale, hands trembling. His lawyer tried to explain something, but he wasn't listening. He stared at me, and in that look there was something that made me step back. Pure hatred. You're going to pay for this, he whispered as he brushed past me exiting the courtroom. My lawyer heard and immediately stepped between us. Was that a threat? He asked loud enough for security to hear. My brother didn't answer. He just left, slamming the door behind him. "I'll document this," my lawyer said, already pulling out his phone. "If he tries anything, we'll have a record." I left the courthouse with my legs shaking. I had won. I had finally won. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt a strange emptiness, as if I had lost something I didn't even know I had. 48 hours later, on Friday at 2 in the afternoon, I drove to the country house with a bailiff and 2 men from a moving company I had hired. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again. Silence. The bailiff checked the documents and nodded. "You may open." I used my key. The door unlocked easily. What I found inside made me stop at the entrance, unable to process what I was seeing. The house was destroyed. Completely destroyed. All the walls had holes. The sofa was ripped, the stuffing scattered across the floor. The windows were broken. The refrigerator was on its side in the middle of the kitchen, its door torn off. In the master bedroom, my old bed was in pieces, literally sawed in half. On the living room walls, spray-painted in black, phrases: "Fake family," "Selfish," "You will regret it." I covered my mouth with my hand. Not from shock. From anger. Anger so intense my whole body trembled. "My God," the bailiff murmured behind me. "I'll need to document this. This is criminal vandalism." He began taking photos. I just stood there, staring at the wreckage of what had once been my home, mentally calculating how much it would cost to repair, how long it would take. And then I saw it. In the middle of the room, on top of the debris of the sofa, a note. I picked it up with trembling hands. The handwriting was my brother's. "You wanted the house back? Here it is. I hope it's worth having lost your family for 4 walls." I balled the paper in my hand. "Is that enough?" I asked the bailiff, my voice eerily calm. "Yes. I'll forward this so a criminal case for property destruction can be opened. With this evidence, it's serious." I left that house and called my lawyer immediately. "He destroyed everything," I said as soon as he answered. "The whole house. It must be at least 50,000 in damages. Take photos of everything. Everything. I'll add it to the existing case and ask the court to investigate for aggravated property damage. With the evidence we already have plus this, he could face criminal charges." I hung up and looked at the house. At the shards of glass glittering in the afternoon sun. At the spray paint on the walls. At years of work destroyed by petty revenge. And then something inside me lit up. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. Because finally, after everything, I saw my brother for what he really was. Not a victim of circumstances. Not someone going through hard times. But a man who, when he couldn't get what he wanted, chose to destroy rather than accept the consequences of his actions. A man who used his own children as a shield and then destroyed a house where they were living. Who put his children in emotional and physical danger just to hurt someone who wouldn't bow to his will. I sat on the car hood and waited for the bailiff to finish his report. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Beautiful. Calm. A cruel contrast to the chaos inside. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. Satisfied. My brother's voice was hoarse, probably from shouting while destroying my house. "You got what you wanted." "I wanted my house back," I replied calmly. "You turned this into a war." "War? You haven't seen anything yet. I'll sue you for everything. I'll tell everyone what kind of person you are. I will." I hung up. I blocked the number. Because I finally understood something fundamental. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter how I reacted. To him, I would always be the villain. Because in his mind, he deserved everything and I deserved nothing. And I no longer needed his approval. Or my parents. Or anyone who thought family meant tolerating abuse. I drove home that night with a crystal clear certainty. The war was over. Not because I had won. But because I had finally freed myself. 3 months later, I was standing in the middle of the living room of the country house, now completely renovated. The smell of fresh paint still hung in the air. The walls were flawless, more beautiful than before. New floors, new windows, new furniture. Everything carefully chosen, every detail thoughtfully considered. It cost a total of $82,000. Much more than the original $23,000. But I didn't care. Because rebuilding that house was more than fixing walls and replacing floors. It was about rebuilding myself. My phone rang. It was my lawyer. "I have news," he said as soon as I answered. "The criminal case has been accepted. Your brother will face charges for qualified damage and trespassing. With the evidence we have, the prosecution is confident." "And the children?" I asked. The question that haunted me every night. "They're with his mother now. His ex-wife filed for full custody after the incident. Seems like that was the last straw for her too." I closed my eyes, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The children were safe. Away from him. "And there's more," the lawyer continued. "He tried to file a suit against you for emotional distress. The judge summarily dismissed it. There's no legal basis for suing someone for exercising their rights over their own property. So it's over? There's still the damages case. He has to pay $500 a month for the next several years. But yes, the criminal part is moving forward, and you're completely clear. More than that, you now have a court record proving you acted within the law at all times." I thanked him and hung up. I looked around the empty house. In 2 weeks, a family would move in. Real tenants. With a lease, a deposit, references. People who would pay rent on time and take care of the place as if it were their own. I had learned the lesson. I would never leave a property empty and vulnerable again. But I had learned much bigger lessons too. I sat on the porch step, watching the sun set once more over that property. I grabbed my phone and, on impulse, unlocked my mother's number. Not to call. Just to read the last messages she had sent before I blocked her. 17 messages. All variations on the same theme. I was cruel, I had destroyed the family, I would regret it. The last one, sent 3 weeks ago. "Your brother is living with a friend now, on a sofa. I hope you can sleep at night knowing that." I could. Sleeping at night had never been so easy. Because I finally understood, it wasn't my responsibility to save an adult man from the consequences of his own choices. It wasn't my obligation to sacrifice my well-being, my peace, my property, just because we shared blood. Family wasn't a license for abuse. Family wasn't emotional blackmail disguised as love. True family was mutual respect, healthy boundaries, support that went both ways. And if my biological family couldn't provide that, then I would build my own family. Friends who supported me through this trial. Colleagues who listened when I needed to vent. People who understood that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was survival. My phone rang again. This time, it was a message from a friend. "Are we still celebrating your victory? I booked a table at that restaurant you love." I smiled. Victory. It seemed like a strange word to describe what had happened. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. I replied yes and stood up, taking one last look at the house before locking the door. 6 months after that message, I received an envelope in the mail. It was from the prosecutor's office. I opened it with slightly trembling hands, even though I already knew nothing bad could come from it. Case closed. Defendant sentenced to community service and a $15,000 fine for qualified damage. Additionally, must complete an anger management rehabilitation program. Permanent restraining order approved. The defendant may not approach the victim or her properties indefinitely. Permanent restraining order. It meant that legally, officially, my brother could no longer appear in my life. He couldn't call me. He couldn't show up at my house. He couldn't even walk down the same street. The law had created the distance between us that I should have established years ago. I filed the document away with all the others. The eviction case, the photos of the damages, the reports. A complete record of everything that happened. Not because I wanted to remember, but because I never wanted to forget the lessons I learned. That night, while eating dinner alone in my apartment, my phone buzzed with a social media notification. Someone had tagged me in a photo. It was my eldest niece. The same one who had called me begging not to evict her father. The photo showed her and her siblings in front of a small but beautiful house. All smiling. The caption read, "A new beginning with Mom. We finally have a real home." My heart tightened. I read the comments. Their mother had commented, "Thank God we overcame everything. The children deserve stability." I thought about responding, giving a like, making some contact. But I didn't. Because those children needed peace. They needed to build a life away from the chaos their father created wherever he went. And if I entered that picture, even with good intentions, I could reopen wounds that were beginning to heal. So I just saved the photo. A reminder that, in the end, we all find our path. Even when that path goes through painful places. A full year after everything, I was at the office when I received an unexpected call. "Hello." "Hi." The voice was hesitant, almost unrecognizable. "It's me. Your dad." I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Since the day I blocked all family numbers. "Hi, Dad," I replied cautiously. Silence for a few seconds. Then, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For not supporting you. For always defending your brother without hearing your side. Your mother and we were wrong. I was wrong. I didn't expect that. In every scenario I had imagined, in every possibility I had considered, I never thought I'd hear my father apologizing. What changed? I asked, my voice colder than intended. Seeing what your brother did. Seeing him destroy everything out of pure revenge. He took a deep breath. You were right. About everything. We created a monster by always protecting him from consequences. And you were always the strong one. Always the one who didn't need us. But that wasn't an excuse for not supporting you. Tears burned my eyes. Not of joy. Of something more complex. Of delayed validation. Of recognition that came too late to change the past, but perhaps in time to build something in the future. Thank you for saying that. I replied. But you need to understand, I won't go back to who I was. I won't accept being treated as a second option. I won't pretend everything is okay. I know. And I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for a chance. To meet the daughter I should have known long ago. The strong woman you became despite us, not because of us. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me wanted to scream everything that had been stuck for years. But the largest part, the part that had grown through that trial, simply wanted peace. We can have coffee, I finally said. Just the two of us. No mom, no brother. Just you and me. I would love that. His voice was choked now. But Dad. I added before hanging up. If you try to convince me to make peace with him, or tell me that family is family, this will be our last conversation. Understood. I promise. We scheduled for the following week. I don't know what to expect. I don't know if we can rebuild anything. But for the first time in a long time, I am willing to try. Not because I need his validation, but because I choose to give this chance. On my terms. Within my boundaries. Today, 2 years after finding my brother living illegally in my country house, I look back and see a woman different from the one who entered that door and froze at the sound of children's laughter. That woman feared conflict. Feared disappointing family. Feared being seen as selfish for protecting what was hers. The woman I am today has none of those fears. I learned that being called selfish by people who want to abuse you isn't an insult, it's a badge of honor. I learned that true family isn't those who share your DNA, but those who respect your boundaries. I learned that kindness without limits isn't kindness, it's self-destruction. The country house now houses a wonderful family who treats the place as a treasure. They send photos of the children playing in the yard, always asking if they can make improvements. They pay rent early every month. My brother. I don't know where he is. I don't ask. I don't look. The restraining order ensures our paths won't cross. And that's exactly how it should be. Some bridges should never be rebuilt. Some doors must remain closed. And some chapters of our lives need to end definitively for new ones to begin. I've learned you can love someone from afar. You can wish the best for them without sacrificing your own well-being. You can have compassion without being a doormat. And I learned the most important lesson of all. You don't owe anyone anything just because you share a last name. Respect isn't inherited. It must be earned. And when someone repeatedly proves they don't deserve your respect, your trust, your time, you have the right, and even the obligation to yourself, to remove that person from your life, no matter who they are. Today, when someone asks me if I regret evicting my own brother, I answer honestly. No. Not at all. Because I didn't evict my brother. I freed myself from a toxic dynamic that was slowly killing me. I chose my peace over the approval of people who never respected me. I chose my dignity over the comfort of maintaining the facade of a happy family. And if you're going through something similar, if someone in your life uses family as an excuse to abuse you, to disrespect your boundaries, to manipulate your emotions, I want you to know, it's okay to say no. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to choose yourself. Because, in the end, the only person who will be with you until the end of your life is you. And you deserve to live a life where you are respected, valued, and treated with dignity. Even if it means leaving some people behind. Especially if it means leaving some people behind. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And remember, your boundaries are valid. Always.